Hello everyone, Hobbyist here. We are back at it again with another Nemesis tutorial guide, but this time we are covering the Lockdown set of characters. But the first thing that I wanted to address, first and foremost, before we get into any deep strategies or anything involving the specific characters, I want to say this. It's not really easy to make a guide without these prefacing concepts. Thing that we need to address is the differences between Nemesis survivors and facility workers, because inside of Nemesis Lockdown, that is one of the big changes that is involved as far as what kind of objectives you're trying to complete and the terms of play style for how easy or how difficult it will be for you. So in Nemesis Lockdown, the survivor and the Labrat are the Nemesis survivors. Other characters from the core box of the first game, as well as the Nemesis Aftermath characters, are all considered survivors. They had previous encounters with intruders, maybe they even survived from the ship or what have you, and they have first-hand experience when it comes to dealing with the alien threats. They also start inside of the isolation room, which, key feature-wise when it comes to strategizing with your survivors, is that you will start with an additional 6 cards so long as the isolation room isn't broken. Facility workers, on the other hand, are the majority of the other Nemesis Lockdown characters, but their key difference is that they have no idea what these alien threats are like, whatsoever. So the thing with them is that they start inside of the repository, which is closer to where the rover is on the Martian base, and is on the first floor, whereas the survivors are on the 3rd floor. But as far as their two types of play style is that they are more mechanically in tune with the actual facility, whereas the survivors are a bit more attuned to the actual combat of the intruders and actually trying to, survive. Last thing that I want to cover before we jump into our first character is the fact that Nemesis survivors are a lot closer to the backup power supply, meaning they're going to have access to power first in comparison to the facility workers. However, the facility workers might have better opportunities to access the computer actions that are inside of Nemesis. So, before we get too further lost into the weeds, let us go ahead and jump into the first character that we're going to start breaking down. Now that you guys have this kind of general overview concept of what you're kind of looking at. The first character that we're going to cover is the Labrat. Is the purple character of Nemesis Lockdown. She is a Nemesis survivor, maybe she was experimented on or whatever, and she's kind of come crawling out of the isolation room to hear all the noise of everything going on around her. The cool thing about the draft cards is that they'll tell you all the specific details that are really important to you as far as how much knowledge you start with, and all of these very important bits of information that the original draft cards didn't possess. But first thing that we got to get out of the way is that you start with 3 knowledge, meaning that you are already well on your way towards accessing the first weakness, because in Nemesis Lockdown, if you remember, the only way to use the weaknesses of whether it's intruders or night stalkers is through having enough knowledge to access them. It's not always just immediately upon discovering them. That is one of the biggest changes as far as figuring out weaknesses, completing objectives, and sometimes even having knowledge is the difference of what keeps you alive and what kills you, depending on what contingencies that you have on you and towards helping you deduce what the final contingency is at the end of the game. Because remember, yes, completing your objective is important, but you're also trying to go around the board gathering information on the CSS pod schedules to see if you can launch out safely. You're also trying to gather other contingencies and read the contingencies of other players to ensure that you can successfully deduce what is the safest means of escape. And you have a lot of more moving parts and decisions to make over the course of Lockdown. So, let's go ahead and start with the first set of cards that are very much new to the Labrat to give a feel of what exactly it is we're all about. So every Lockdown character, much like a lot of the Nemesis characters, have a traditional set of 10 action cards. But we're going to mainly take a look at the main cards that make the Labrat very different from pretty much the rest of the characters. And the first card that we're going to look at is one called Inconspicuous. This doesn't require any actions of any kind. This one's more of a reactionary card. And the first half of this card says, discard this card when an intruder attacks you, but before drawing an attack card. And if there's another, and there has to be another character in the room you are in. The intruder then attacks this character instead of you. Honestly, really, really powerful. Especially during the intruder attack step, it gives you a chance to stay alive, and you're basically just kind of throwing your friend in the way of being attacked. So, that's a lot of fun. But, in Darkness, you can discard this card when you have to perform a noise roll during the intruder bag development step of the event phase, and you do not have to perform this roll. Honestly, a super powerful card. Much like a lot of the other purple characters in Nemesis, the Labrat is very good at getting around the facility, which is going to be really important because you want to ensure that there's a power on your floor to access the computer actions and to make sure your noise goes away during the event phase, but giving you this chance to where even if you are rolling for noise, it's not so bad for you. It makes things a whole lot easier for you to deal with. Next card that we have is also another reactionary card. It's no action as far as like how much it costs, doesn't have to be in or outside of combat, and this one's called Feel the Dark. You can discard this card during the event phase, then ignore the in darkness effect of an event for you, which is really, really good because generally a lot of the times, even though event cards we know are generally bad, but the darkness effect always seems to make it worse when you don't have power. Whether it was because the power went out on your floor, somebody switched the tiles, or what have you. But this makes this to where you're dealing with the lesser of two evils, which is really nice. The other thing that you can do is that you could discard this card in Darkness during a surprise attack after drawing an attack card to ignore its effect. Just having a free action card of, no, I'm not getting attacked despite the cards that I have, thank you very much, is really powerful, especially combined with Inconspicuous, because you have stuff controlled during the event phase, during intruder bag development, especially during the intruder attack step of the event phase. Like, you have a lot of means, by far more so than the scout and even the bounty hunter, of just avoiding being attacked. And honestly, that might be the biggest difference of staying alive, you know? Next card we have is our first cost card, to where it's not going to cost you anything extra, you just play the card, and you can only do this while you aren't in combat. And it is called Sensitive Hearing. You can either discard a noise marker from a chosen corridor connected to the room you are in, or place a noise marker in a chosen corridor connected to the room you are in. Now, this is where you cause tons of shenanigans, if you're being totally honest. Because adding noise or taking it away, again, it just frees up all that movement for you to do just a variety of different things, to where if there is noise surrounding a place, say you were had danger, then you could just simply remove the noise and carefully move into that room and place the noise back where you went, to where you're not getting any attacks or anything like that. It's a safer, easier means of travel. It really is. And the last card that we have is honestly the most interesting one to me, because again, it's one where it doesn't matter if you're in combat or not, you could just use it, doesn't cost you anything, and it's called Weird Metabolism. You could just get rid of a slime marker, which is fantastic. Searching for clothes is not always the best thing in any other means. So yeah, you just casually just, no thanks slime, I'm not going to be rolling for danger, is really great. But the second half of this card is really interesting, is that you can discard a contamination card from your hand to draw 2 cards from your deck. Granted, this isn't getting rid of the contamination card entirely, but being able to get rid of those contamination cards that are blocking your hand, maybe freeing up your action economy to do more stuff, is really, really, really good. And then pretty much the rest of the deck is just a traditional search, demolition, interruption, second search card, the rest card, and the basic repairs that cost 2. So, a lot of the Labrat's kit is going to be about the mobility of things. It's about moving and getting to places without really encountering anything. And if you do encounter something, then just having the cards to just not take damage, which is really nice. But now, let's go ahead and get to the quest item. First thing to notice is that the Labrat doesn't have any starting weapons. You have 2 free hand slots, which can be a bad thing if you get encounters early, but otherwise it frees up hand slots to grab corpses, maybe research some weaknesses and things like that. It gives you an interesting idea of means. But the quest item Whale is an interesting card. The nice thing that Lockdown does is it reminds you that you can't activate quest items if you are in combat by this combat symbol right here. And you can only activate this item in the nest, but you have to perform a noise roll afterwards in order to activate it. So, could be a risk, but otherwise you should totally be fine. But what it does, for one-time use, is honestly the most shenanigan-filled or life-saving card, period. And in Whale, you can use this once to either remove a noise marker from each corridor in a section you are in, or place a noise marker in each corridor without a noise marker in a section you are in. Oh, buddy. So, just to give context of just how great that card is, if you've got noise everywhere and you need to get out of a floor and you don't think you can reach the elevator and you might have to go through the stairs, then you could just simply use that card to clear the entire floor and you can just kind of walk around a bit because you won't worry about triggering an encounter. Or, the fun thing to do is that you make sure that you cut off the power on a particular floor and make sure it's where everybody is located. And then basically, on each of the stairways towards the elevator, is that you then use Whale, fill the whole floor with noise, and you just use the elevator to dip. Because realistically, players are not going to be able to go anywhere unless they decide to buddy up together without triggering encounters. And even then, on the event phase, if there's a roll for noise section, then there's still a crap ton of noise where a crap ton of encounters can happen all at the same time. And the next thing you know, the floor that you were on is now completely covered with aliens. So, it's a really, really good card if you have an objective for trying to kill somebody. Or even if you're just trying to focus on escaping. Because again, a lot of the purple characters are focused on using their abilities to get out of situations and not be in the situations in the first place. Yeah, when it comes to corporate objectives, for the Labrat, you want stuff that takes out other characters, whether it's specific player numbers, whether it's making yourself the only survivor. Sure, you could do some of these signal or procedures. Again, more player stuff. And then taking out even more players. Like, if you're trying to take somebody out, if you're going the corporate route, I would recommend using the Labrat. Try to get your hands on some weapons early because you don't have any weapons to start with. But otherwise, find your way over to the nest, get your hands on Whale, and set yourself up for a situation to where you can cover a floor with noise, turn off the power so they can't get it, and then it's nigh impossible for them to leave. So yeah, I think that the Labrat is pretty good at her job as far as everything she's trying to accomplish. I think the biggest cons, however, is that simple fact. She's not very much looking for trying to get into a fight. So if she's put in a situation where there's aliens, well, that's where the trouble starts to come in. But otherwise, I hope this starter video for this new series of characters was very helpful to you, and I'll see you guys in the next video.